It was a late afternoon when I wandered into the dispensary. The kind of place with clean lines, sleek counters, and soft ambient lighting. A soft haze of THC hung in the air, mingling with the scent of lavender and pine. I hadn't been into a dispensary for a while, but tonight I needed something special. The bud tender, a lanky guy with dark hair, noticed me lingering by the counter. His eyes gleamed with an almost unnerving enthusiasm as he leaned in.
Looking for something new? Something extraordinary?
I raised an eyebrow.
Yeah, sure. Something different. Surprise me.
He grinned, revealing a set of crooked teeth.
I've got just the thing. A strain called Chronos.
He paused for effect, watching my face.
It's rare. Real rare. A hybrid, but it's got the properties that most people aren't aware of.
I frowned.
Properties? Chronos doesn't get you high.
He said, his voice lowering.
It lets you see the future.
I stared at him, unsure if he was joking or if I'd stumbled into some kind of weird marketing stunt. But his expression was serious, and his eyes flickered with something darker.
Seriously,
He continued.
one hit and you'll get a glimpse of what's coming. You might see a few hours ahead, or years. It's unpredictable, but it's always accurate.
My heart raced at the thought. I've never heard of anything like that. The idea of seeing into the future, of getting some kind of glimpse of what was waiting for me, was tempting.
How much?
I asked, already pulling out my wallet. He smiled as though he had been waiting for that.
A bit more than your typical bud, but for something like this, it's worth it.
I handed over the money, and with a knowing nod, he handed me a small glass jar with a deep golden hue and the buds inside. The label read, Chronos, an elegant script accompanied by a strange symbol that seemed to shift slightly when I looked at it too long. That night, I couldn't wait to try it. I took a small hit, my fingers trembling slightly as I inhaled. At first it was like any other strain, smooth, rich and earthy, but then something shifted. The air around me felt thicker and heavier. A subtle buzz filled my body, but it was different from any other high I'd felt before. Suddenly, everything around me warped. The room seemed to stretch and shrink. I felt like I was sinking, falling through time itself. My pulse quickened, and then it happened. At first it was blurry, like a fogged-up mirror clearing. Slowly, the future began to reveal itself in fragmented images. I saw myself smiling, a sense of joy and peace surrounding me. I saw my wife, her eyes full of love, a celebration, friends, family, everything seemed perfect. But the images shifted. They flickered like a damaged film reel, and the joy turned into something else. In one moment, I saw her standing above me, a look of cold indifference on her face. I couldn't breathe. In another vision, I saw her holding something, a glint of metal catching the light. My body went cold. I tried to pull away from the vision, but it kept coming relentless. I saw myself lying on the floor, a deep gash in my side, blood pooling around me. She stood over me, her hand trembling, her face filled with guilt and fear, but also something darker, a look that sent a chill through me. A whisper that I couldn't barely hear, but I knew what it said. I'm sorry. It had to happen. I gasped, pulling myself out of the vision, my body slick with sweat. I tried to steady myself, my hands shaking, but the images wouldn't stop. I saw her again, but this time it wasn't a death. She was there, holding me, crying as I slipped away. The visions grew more intense, more chaotic. But every time I turned away, another future unfolded. A future where my death was inevitable. A future where she was responsible. I dropped the joint, my mind spinning. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. What the hell was this? Why had I been shown this? I stumbled to the window, gasping for air. The world outside looked the same. Peaceful, quiet. But I knew it was all a lie. I knew that somewhere in my future I couldn't escape. My end was written. I had to warn her. I had to stop it. But the more I tried to grasp at the future, the more it slipped away from me. Was it fate? Was it destiny? Or had my mind broken under the weight of the truth? I didn't know how long I stood there, staring out the window, but eventually I turned, heart hammering in my chest. I looked at the jar of Kronos on the counter, the label now distorted, the symbol shifting in ways that made my stomach turn. The visions I had seen were just the beginning, and now I knew I couldn't escape them. It was coming. I was going to die, and my wife would be the one to do it. I needed to find a way out, but the future already set. As I turned back to face the door, I couldn't shake the feeling that Kronos hadn't just shown me the future. It had bound me to it, and I was trapped. It was supposed to be a routine trip. I had heard about a new dispensary that opened up on the edge of town. A friend had recommended it, saying the selection was top-notch. So after a long week, I decided to stop by. Nothing crazy, just pick up a little something to unwind. The dispensary was sleek and modern, with a polished glass storefront and almost clinical vibe. The windows were tinted, and the lights inside flickered in a strange hypnotic pattern. I felt a strange pull as I stepped inside. The air was thick, with a pungent, earthy aroma, but it wasn't the usual weed smell I was used to. There was something sharper about it. I walked up to the counter, where a young woman with pale skin and dark hollow eyes greeted me. Her smile was wide and unsettling, as if her lips had been stretched too far. Her hair was perfectly styled, but too stiff, too unnatural. It almost looked like a wig. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice smooth, yet with an odd rhythmic cadence. "Yeah," I said, trying to shake the feeling of unease that crept over me. "Just looking for something to relax. Been a long week." She studied me for a moment, her eyes scanning me with an intensity that felt invasive. She didn't blink. "We have just the thing," she said, her smile widening. Behind her, the shelves were stocked with rows and rows of jars filled with different strains, but something felt wrong. The labels on the jars were written in strange, flowing script, but when I looked closer, the words seemed to shimmer and shift, almost as if they were alive. "Try this," she said, gesturing to one of the jars on the top shelf. It was labeled Nova Green. The buds inside looked strange, slightly translucent, glowing faintly under the fluorescent lights. They didn't look like the weed I'd seen before. "What's Nova Green?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "It's a special strain," she replied, her smile growing a little wider. "One of our most popular. It helps let go of their stress, clears your mind. It makes you feel peaceful." I hesitated, the back of my mind buzzing with the feeling I couldn't shake. Something about her voice, something about the way she spoke. I shrugged it off. Maybe I was just tired. I reached for the jar, and she handed it to me. Her fingers were unnaturally cold. As I looked closer at the jar, I noticed something else, an odd symbol etched into the glass, just below the lid. It was strange, geometric shape, almost like a starburst, but with too many points, too symmetrical. It made my head ache just to focus on it for too long. "I'll take it," I said, trying to push aside the growing unease. She rang me up with an efficiency that felt robotic, handing me the bag without a word. As I turned to leave, I glanced over my shoulder. The woman was staring at me, still smiling. Her eyes locked onto mine. She didn't blink. She didn't move. I stepped outside into the cool evening air, shaking off the odd feeling. I figured I was just overthinking things. It was probably just a weird vibe from the store. I've smoked weed plenty of times, and I was sure Nova Green would be no different. Back home, I sat down, rolled a joint with the strange buds, and took a deep drag. The smoke was smooth, like it slid effortlessly into my lungs. For a few moments, everything felt normal, and then it hit me. The world around me began to blur, the colors intensified, stretching and shifting in ways they shouldn't. I felt heavy, almost like gravity was pulling me down harder than before. My thoughts were slowing, each one trailing off before I could finish it. The buzz was strong, but it wasn't the usual stoned feeling. It was like my brain was losing grip on reality. I started to feel stupid, not the typical high way, but in a deeper, unsettling sense. Words became hard to form, thoughts dissolved before I could even finish them. The room around me shifted, the walls pulsing and flickering like a bad TV signal. I tried to focus on something, anything, but my mind was slipping away from me, like water draining from a faucet. I stumbled to my feet, panic rising in my chest. This wasn't normal. This wasn't right. I tried to remember what I was doing just an hour ago, but the memories felt distant, like they belonged to someone else. Suddenly, I heard a knock at the door. Was this real? Was I imagining things? I opened the door, and standing there was a man, tall with sharp figures and hollow eyes. His skin was unnaturally smooth, like he had been molded from plastic. "I see you've tried it," he said, his voice cold and mechanical. "Nova Green. It's a very special strain. It doesn't just relax you, it alters you. Makes you more manipulable." I tried to say something, but my tongue felt thick. The words wouldn't come. The man stepped closer, his eyes boring into mine.
You feel it, don't you? The fog, the confusion. That's the point. Nova Green isn't just weed. It's a weapon.
I tried to back away, but my legs wouldn't cooperate. The words from the woman at the dispensary came flooding back to me, but they no longer made sense. She said it would clear my mind. She said it would help me let go of my stress. But this wasn't clarity. This wasn't peace. It was dumbing me down.
Do you know why?
He asked, his grin widening as though savoring for the moment.
We've been doing this for years. The weed we bring to Earth, they're not from your world. They're from ours. Each one is carefully engineered to lower the IQ of anyone who smokes it.
He stepped closer, and I felt a cold sweat trickle down my spine. My mind was slipping further away with every word.
You're not the first,
he continued, his voice taking a darker tone.
There's a whole network of dispensaries just like this one, all over your planet, selling the same plants, and every time we sell a batch, the Earth gets a little more dumbed down, a little more susceptible. Soon, the whole world will be under our control. No resistance, no fight, just empty, compliant minds.
I felt like I was drowning in my own mind, losing who I was with every passing second. My thoughts were nothing but fog. I was nothing. The man reached out and gently placed a cold hand on my shoulder, and for the first time, I realized there was no escape. Not from this high, not from them. And I was just another mind to be conquered. The last thing I remember was his voice echoing in my mind as the darkness swallowed me whole.
You're just the beginning.